Hey everybody, another 8th grade American history lecture video from me, Coach Goodrich. If you like what you're seeing and hearing, please subscribe for more content like this. This is actually going to probably be the second to last video I upload on this, at least for this school year. I'm going to split this one up into two, but this is Unit 11 from my 8th graders in American history, America in World War II. Unit 10, we discussed where we left off. We talked about the New Deal and some of the things that Franklin D. Roosevelt, the president at that time, was trying to implement in order to kickstart the economy to get us out of the Great Depression. The most important thing that gets us out of the Great Depression is the World War II. Don't let anybody tell you different. The other stuff might have helped a little bit. This is what gets us out. If you want to get out of an economic crisis, start a war. Number one, was the use of nuclear weapons at the end of World War II justified? And number two, how did the U.S. help the Allied powers to win World War II? So go ahead and pause the video right here so you can write this down. Background, pre-U.S. involvement, late 1930s, early 1940s. Japan invades China in the late 1930s with the intent of extending their empire, led by General Hideki Tojo, who pretty much was a de facto leader at that time. With the rise of fascism in Europe, which is like extreme nationalism and statism, the state above everything in Europe, Italy spreads its reach into North Africa, led by the dictator Benito Mussolini. And then the Nazi Party, which is the National German Socialist Workers' Party or something like that, in Germany, led by Chancellor Adolf Hitler, invades Poland, Belgium, France, and Russia with the intent of creating the Third Reich, or the Third Empire. These three leaders unite to form the Axis powers. And you got Mussolini, Tojo, and Hitler. Another picture of them right here. These are traditionally seen as the bad guys. The U.S., before the war, the U.S. still in the grip of the Great Depression. So got breadlines, soup kitchens, high unemployment, etc. FDR, kind of seeing the writing on the wall with all of these nationalistic powers rising in Japan and in Europe, begins to try and reinforce who would become the Allied powers in Britain by selling weapons and supplies via the Lend-Lease and the Cash and Carry Acts, while hoping to stay neutral, trying not to get involved in any more European wars. This helps to stimulate the economy. I mean, like I said, if you want to make money, start a war. Most Americans wanted Britain to win the war that was coming, but things are not looking good. The French are conquered in about a month. Britain is defeated at the very edge of France at Dunkirk. They had to have a surprise retreat in order to get everybody back across the English Channel, now fighting for their survival in the aerial battle of Britain. So what directly gets us into the war was the Pearl Harbor attacks that took place on the early morning hours of December 7th, 1941. In order to secure their empire in the Pacific and send a message to the world that they're ready to attack and they're ready to be a superpower, Japan bombs the U.S. fleet at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, and on several other U.S. and British targets throughout the Pacific on the same day within hours of each other. 350 Japanese aircraft destroyed 12 American ships with over 3,500 casualties. Within the week, Congress declares war on Japan, and the Axis powers declare war on the U.S. U.S. formally joins the Allied powers, which at that point was made up of Britain and the USSR, the Soviet Union, Russia. It will take several months for the U.S. to be ready to fight at full strength, especially with half of their Pacific fleet destroyed in a matter of hours. So major U.S. military leaders and their positions, Franklin D. Roosevelt as the president and also the commander-in-chief. He's the one who decides most of the action and has the final say. George C. Marshall was the general of the Army, the 5-star general. Dwight D. Eisenhower was the supreme Allied commander in Europe, was a 4-star general. Douglas MacArthur was the general of the Army, 5-star general in the Pacific. George S. Patton, commander of the 3rd Army, became a 4-star general by the end of the war. He is going to be an armored tank division leader, primarily in North Africa and later in Europe. Other Allied commanders, Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, and Joseph Stalin, the dictator of the USSR. There is FDR. George C. Marshall, Dwight D. Eisenhower, Douglas MacArthur. Patton, Churchill, and Joseph Stalin. War in the Pacific, combination of naval battles, aircraft carriers, and brutal close-quarter combat. So, samurai swords, bayonets, suicide bombers, a distinct lack of Japanese prisoners, something like only 5% of all casualties in the Japanese army were prisoners of war, etc. Most of the ground fighting was going to be done by the Marines. The strategy that they were going to use was island hopping, strategically conquering island after island after island to get across the Pacific, get close enough to bomb Tokyo was the main point. As the war progressed, 110 Japanese Americans, mostly in California, were going to be placed in internment camps, fear of potential traitors. This was a bad idea for us, really bad publicity at this point for that. So you see all of these little tiny islands right here can be spread out through the Pacific as you are working your way from America in the east in this part, and then crawling up this way. Some of the internment camps. So there are a bunch of battles in the Pacific, and there's no way to get to all of it. Really a bunch of battles, very important battles in this war, and there's no way to get to all of them. So I tried to pick like 5 key events or battles in each of the 3 major theaters of war that we could focus on. So pay attention to the dates and the stats here. First one, Battle of Midway, June 1942. Naval battle that took place north of Hawaii, resulting in a decisive American victory and the loss of 4 Japanese carriers. This was our first major engagement after being attacked at Pearl Harbor. Notice it came 6 months later, so a long time later, 7 months later. But this showed that we were kind of back to full strength, or working our way back to full strength. Number 2, Guadalcanal, August 1942 to February 1943. The first major ground offensive by the U.S., 15,000 U.S. casualties versus 30,000 Japanese casualties. Number 3, island hopping battles, just various island hopping battles between 1943 and 1944, slowly pushing the Japanese back towards the mainland, high casualties on both sides. Number 4, Iwo Jima, February to March of 1945. 110,000 U.S. troops versus 20,000 Japanese. Costly American victory, 7,000 U.S. deaths to 18,000 Japanese deaths. Gained an island close enough to launch a sea invasion of Japan. And then finally, Okinawa between April and June of 1945. Nearly 100,000 Japanese casualties set the stage for the atomic bombing of Tokyo that was to come. War in North Africa. Africa had been an important destination for colonies since the 1800s, with a lot of European imperial influence, which we talked about leading up to World War I, Britain, France, Germany, Italy, etc., with the splitting up of Africa and the different colonial influences and colonial areas. Strategically, North Africa could be used as a secondary, kind of like a backdoor entrance into Europe. It was known as the soft underbelly to Europe. Mainly British and then American and Free French resistance invasion versus the Italians, the Germans, and their allies. So you see some of the theaters here, or some of the areas here in this theater of war. Major battles, just a couple of them to talk about here. Operation Torch, November 1942. British and American tank forces, 107,000 strong, are victorious versus the French and German puppet state Vichy France and their allies. Yes, the French here, because technically Germany had taken over France. So the people who are not fighting for the French resistance are being forced to fight for the Germans. First major American involvement in the war, going to successfully invade Morocco, Tunisia, and Algeria. And then the Battle of Tunisia, November 1942 to May 1943, a series of tank battles pitting the Americans, under General Patton, and British troops versus Italy and Germany's famous Afrika Korps, led by Erwin the Desert Fox Rommel. Resulted in the eventual surrender of 200,000 Axis troops and the conquering of North Africa. And this ladies and gentlemen, is where we're going to start today. When we get back, we're going to pick up with the war in Europe, probably the most famous part of the war for most of us here. Going to pick up there, and which will lead us up to the end of the war. No mini quiz. No mini quiz is going to be posted here today. I think there's only one for this unit. So make sure you're paying attention. Go to your Run Web lesson plan so that you can get everything that you need. And you guys be safe out there. And I look forward to doing another video for you guys here very soon.